I call the honourable member Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. Ngā mihi nui
Tēnā.
kia koutou. Kia ora. It's great to be here discussing what's popularly known as the ultra-fast broadband bill, but what I've seen in the process through the Select Committee, through the debate in this House, through the process, is an ultra-fast broadband bill. It's a privilege to be here today and take a call on the Telecommunications, TSO, Broadband and Other Matters bill. The Green Party supports better broadband. We know it's vital for our economic, ecologic future, but we do not support and we will not be voting for this bill for the reasons I'll elucidate in this speech. This bill has been rammed through a poor process. We'll see poor outcomes and Kiwis are going to be poorer because of it. UFB, or ultra-fast broadband, can transform our world, and we heard the Minister talk about the transformative benefits of broadband. But unlike Mr Bennett, who argued we've delivered it already, or the government's delivered it already, what we're seeing is a process which has taken years to roll out. We've seen industry sector groups totally alienated, absolutely frustrated at the process, and we're still seeing a bill which is going to take almost a decade to finally roll out ultra-fast broadband. I think the tragedy of the bill and the way the Minister's gone about doing it is we've focused on the poor process, we've focused on the monopoly, we've focused on the regulatory forbearance. Nowhere in the Select Committee, nowhere in the debate have we actually focused on the benefits substantially. Now, broadband can bring fundamental benefits to the medical sector, to the educational sector, the entertainment sector. It can even change our Parliament and our government and make our democracy more inclusive, transparent and engaged with our citizenry. I believe the internet is a human right, or access to information is a human right, and I wish we were having these discussions in Parliament, but instead, because of the way the Minister's gone about it, we've had to debate the poor process and the poor decisions he's made. I'd like to thank the Select Committee members, the Chairman, Mr Foss, the officials, the submitters. I'd like to point out the good work and the great questions of David Cunliffe and Claire Curran in the House. In this call, Mr Speaker, I'd like to look at a few issues. I want to look at the bill, the history, the process. I'd like to look at the forbearance and the embarrassing back-down the Minister was forced to undertake. I'd like to look at the Kiwi share changes. I want to look at Telecom, who ultimately is the big winner of the ultra-fast broadband bill. And I want to lastly, Mr Speaker, summarise why the Green Party will be opposing. And fundamentally, it's not because we're opposed to broadband, it's because we're opposed to this bill, the poor process, and the fundamental missed opportunities this bill symbolises. So firstly, this bill takes a great chunk of taxpayers' cash, more than $1.35 billion, and gives it essentially, or the lion's share, to Telecom to achieve their goal of 75% coverage. Well, we can debate the definition of what high-speed broadband actually is, especially in regard to the upload speeds. We can say it's good that broadband is going out there. We support the Rural Broadband Initiative. We don't think there should be a gap in coverage between rural and urban Kiwis. It changes the telecommunications service obligation and the levy. The big change it introduced in this House, in the committee stage, was the Kiwi share, which I'll touch on. So firstly, when you look at the history of the telecommunications sector, it's been characterised by monopoly, poor services, anti-competitive nature. Just a couple of weeks ago, Telecom was fined $12 million for their anti-competitive processes through 2001 to 2004. And we've got to ask ourselves, why are we here throwing more than $1 billion essentially at Telecom to deliver something? And it's because of their lack of investment and the lack of investment-friendly environment to actually get better broadband rolled out for Kiwis. So the National Party took it to the election, made it one of their top priorities, but for some reason Stephen Joyce, the Minister of ICT, left it to 2.5 years in to finally get a bill through the House. So Mr Bennett calls it delivered. We haven't even passed it. We haven't seen any broadband rolled out. I think it's a bit premature to be saying it's been delivered. The Minister in his call on the third reading said that we'd had wide support from industry and those opposing it, which was mostly just the opposition, was jumping at shadows. I don't know if the Minister saw the widespread advertising on television and print, the letters the Select Committee was hearing, the blogs, the newspaper articles. There was fundamental, huge opposition to this bill and this precedent. It was only Telecom, as Ms Curran says, who supported it. There was an impressive number of telcos and industry watchdogs that came out together with very diverse interests to oppose this bill. I think it's ridiculous to be saying it was just jumping at shadows. We've seen a shocking process with SOP 247 tabled during the Select Committee process, and SOP actually bigger than the actual legislation it was amending. We saw SOP 204, I believe, tabled in the committee stages with these fundamental changes to KiwiShare. We've seen secretive backroom meetings, a lack of consultation, an absolute arrogance by the Minister. Every single question was answered simply by saying, you don't understand it. And it's the same from MED with their legal advice. You just don't understand. Only we understand.
Order.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. You understand. Mr. Speaker, we saw a great deal of arrogance by the Minister saying to people that they didn't understand, and an absolute lack of cross-party consultational consensus. When it comes to telecommunications, this shouldn't be a partisan issue. The different parties should work together, because what we all want is better broadband for Kiwis. So we saw a good Select Committee process that came with some good changes, along with the equivalence ruling, not as high as we'd like, but we acknowledge ground was given there. We saw the review brought forward, some good changes there. But the main issue that submitters made in the Select Committee was around forbearance. Now, I believe the Minister is acting like a bit of a cowboy, because what the regulatory forbearance was essentially because the government wouldn't put in adequate funds to develop the resource. I think the most apt analogy is like the Wild West of America, where we were trying to develop an infrastructure, be railways in the 1860s in America, broadband today. So we saw Cowboy Joyce to set up a Wild West environment where there was no regulations, so private people could essentially benefit. Totally unprecedented in the New Zealand legislation and probably worldwide as well. Yet we saw absolute intransigence by the Minister, who was categorically, fundamentally opposed to changing position on it, fundamentally opposed to letting his officials do extra work on it. Yet we saw the Minister, 2 days after the bill was tabled, have to back down because of the real politics played by the Māori Party, and I say good on them. It was a shocking process. We had to see this change. And now the Minister has totally changed tune. He says, we somehow we found the solution. Yet this solution hasn't been through a Select Committee process. It hasn't been consulted with the public or the sector. And essentially what we've done, and why we're opposed, while we initially welcomed the back down by the Minister, we're opposed because what he's replaced regulatory forbearance with, replaced the Wild West environment is, he's actually given a blank cheque to the Wild West, so the Wild West is still there, but he's saying if you set up Camp or City in the Wild West, we'll cover your risks, we'll underwrite you. Absolute shocking, Mr. Speaker, and the Minister had the good sense to back the regulatory holiday. I wish he'd now back the holiday highway. Mr. Speaker, the real winner of this bill is Telecom. They're going to be taking around $929 million of taxpayers' funds, and the vast bulk of that is just simply going to flow offshore. We're still subject to the shareholder vote on the structural separation, and there's huge questions, maybe up to $900 million worth of taxpayer money going to Telecom. So in summary, Mr. Speaker, what we've seen is a bill set up a monopoly. Essentially, it's going to be bad for consumers. We've seen a poor process, poor outcomes, a poor deal for Kiwis. Telecommunications shouldn't be partisan. We would have worked with the government to deal with a good policy. And essentially what we've got now is increased policy uncertainty for the sector as the Labour Party and the Green parties will look to reform it in the future. So what I've seen is the Minister in his ICT hat acting just like the Minister of Transport with his transport hat, a poor process where he's ramming motorways and other type of infrastructure through communities in Kapiti, Waterview, changing the Greater Wellington Regional Council's water rules. We're seeing the Minister throw huge sums of money in terms of motorways, $10.7 billion on just 7 roads of significance to national, with bad benefit cost ratios, where the main beneficiaries are corporate New Zealand, and ultimately, just like this broadband bill, it's locking us in to an outdated concept. When it comes to the roads of significance to national, it's locking us into a car and oil-dependent future, and with this, it's locking us into an old-fashioned copper sector. We should have been looking to the future. That's the massive missed opportunity of this bill. So in transport, I called Stephen Joyce the Colossus of roads, building a monument in asphalt and concrete to folly, and if I recall rightly, the Colossus of roads was actually made of copper.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the